Psalm 106:6 says, "We have sinned with our fathers, we have committed iniquity, we have done wickedly. Our fathers understood not thy wonders in Egypt. They remembered not the multitude of thy mercies, but provoked him at the sea, even at the Red Sea. Nevertheless, he saved them for his name's sake, that he might make his mighty power to be known. He rebuked the Red Sea also when it was dried up. So he led them through the depths as through the wilderness, and saved them from the hand of him that hated them, and redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. And the waters covered their enemies, there was not one of them left. Then believed they his words, they sang his praise. They soon forget his works. They waited not for his counsel, but lusted exceedingly in the wilderness, and tempted God in the desert. And he gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul." Heavenly Father, bless, I pray, the reading of your word, the preaching to follow. Lord, I pray that you would help me to be focused. Don't let me have my mind wander or be on any peripheral thing. Help me to have clarity of speech, ease of thought, and I pray that you do your perfect work through your perfect word this morning. Mold us into the image of Christ through it, and for these things we'll give you the praise and glory. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Psalm 106 recounts the hundreds of years of Jewish history beginning with the Exodus. The last two verses we just read, though, deal with a very particular and putrid matter of disobedience in the wilderness. They deal with the time when Israel refused to be satisfied with what God was giving them and instead demanded something different. And as verse 15 observes, God gave them what they wanted, but they did not like the results in the least. He gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. Keep a marker there in Psalm 106. But go back to Numbers chapter 11. Let me show you what Psalm 106 is referring to. We'll pick it up at Numbers chapter 11, verse 4. When you get there, this is what the psalmist was talking about. Numbers chapter 11, verse 4. The Bible says, "And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There's nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes." And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar and bake it in pans and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child, unto the land which thou swarest unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh that we may eat. I'm not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of thine hand, if I found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them. They shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. And say thou unto the people, Sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh. For ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, Who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and ye shall eat. Ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days. But even a whole month, until it come out at your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you, because that ye despise the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why came we forth out of Egypt? And Moses said, The people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, and thou hast said, I will give them flesh, that they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? And the Lord said unto Moses, As the Lord's hand waxed short, thou shalt see now whether my word shall come to pass unto thee or not. And Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people, and set them round about the tabernacle. And the Lord came down in a cloud, and spake unto him, and took of the Spirit that was upon him, and gave it unto the 70 elders. And it came to pass that when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied and did not cease. But there remained 2 of the men in the camp. The name of the one was Eldad, the name of the other Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them. And they were of them that were written, but went not out into the tabernacle. And they prophesied in the camp. And there ran a young man and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My Lord Moses, forbid them. And Moses said unto him, Enviest thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. And Moses gat him into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 omers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth-Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted. Now, by way of setting, please understand that the events in this passage took place around 1461 BC, maybe a year and a half or so after the children of Israel left their bondage in Egypt. They've not yet made it to the border of Canaan the first time. They'll do so in just a few months. So as far as all of them know, they don't have much longer to be in the wilderness. If they do right, they're going to soon be in the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. Now, we know how that turned out. We know that they chose to believe the report of the 10 evil and faithless spies. We know they chose to ignore the advice of Joshua and Caleb. We know that because of their disobedience, they spent another 38 years in the wilderness for a total of 40. But at this point in the text, they don't know that. All they know is that they've been in the wilderness for what seems to them like forever, to quote our kids. For roughly a year and a half, they've been simply wandering around the desert, taking instructions from God as to what He expects from them as a people, both there in the desert and especially when they get into the promised land. During that year and a half, naturally, they had to eat. And since the number of the people was about 2 million, when you consider the 600,000 men plus women and children, it would take a miracle for that to happen. There was no way they could carry that much food for that much people for that long of a time. There was nowhere in the wilderness to buy it. So what are they going to do? What's going to be the plan here? Well, God came through with a miracle. Look at verses 12 through 15 again. He said, I've heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, At even ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it came to pass that at even the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, the face of the wilderness, there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost, on the ground. This is, by the way, Exodus 16, in case I did not say so. Exodus 16:15. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, It is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. Drop down to Exodus 16:31. And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. And it was like the coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, This is the thing which the Lord commandeth. Fill an omer of it to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread wherewith I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you forth from the land of Egypt. And Moses said unto Aaron, Take a pot, and put an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before the Lord to be kept for your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years, until they came to a land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. Now, in this initial miracle from Exodus 16, shortly after leaving Egypt, God did 2 things at once for the children of Israel. He brought quail into their camp for them to eat at supper, and then He began providing manna for them every morning. Now, of the manna, we're specifically told that it kept coming for 40 years until they got to Canaan. The quail, though, did not. And that was just to get their feet under them there in the wilderness and to get them acclimated to the manna, the main dish that they were going to be eating. But after a year and a half, they are uttering this complaint in Numbers 11, 5, and 6 again. We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is, notice the next 3 words, nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. Moses, we're sick of this.
We can't stand it. We're done. There's nothing to eat around here besides this manna. Now, what is it that they were complaining about exactly? Well, let me tell you what Psalm 78 says, because it's another passage that describes the same thing. Psalm 78, 24 and 25 says, "And had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full." Angels' food. Are you getting that? Literally, what the angels eat in heaven. God took that and rained it down for humans. And what was it like, this angels' food that they were eating? Well, two passages we read described it. The first is Exodus 16:31. "And the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. It was like coriander seed, white. And the taste of it was like wafers made with honey." Say that with me. Wafers made with honey. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Especially since it's like 10 minutes to 12 and you're all hungry. And I'm here talking about wafers made with honey. And you know the kids in the toddler church, they have it and you don't. So the first thing it's like Matt's leaving, man. He's going heading back there. First thing it's like, it's a sweet thing. It's like a dessert. We can put it that way, okay? Wafers made with honey. But if that's all you had, wafers made with honey, after a while, maybe I get the point, you get sick of that. Look at Numbers chapter 11, verse 7 and 8, though. Numbers 11, 7 and 8. "And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof is the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar, and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. Raw, it tasted sweet, like wafers with honey. Cooked as a bread, it was like fresh oil in the bread." In other words, think of hot buttered rolls. Now are you getting hungry? You've got this vision in your mind of these gigantic yeast rolls, like from Golden Corral, or whatever the case may be. That's a lot like what it was. Think of the versatility of that. Raw, uncooked, wafers and honey. Cooked is like soft, buttered, oiled bread. That's an amazing food we're talking about. And here's how he delivered it each day. Numbers 11:9. "And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it." That's it. It just fell from heaven right around their camp, landed on the dew. They went out and gathered as much as they needed. Even Biden-inflation couldn't touch that. I'm just telling you. I mean, it's plentiful. They don't have to pay for it. It's as cheap as it can be. I mean, it's free. This is amazing stuff. And yet, just a few months in, and just a few months till they would no longer need it if they did right, we read this in verse 5 and 6. "We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic, but now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes." There's nothing beside this wafer and honey tasting stuff. There's nothing beside this stuff that's like hot, oiled, buttered bread. There's nothing beside that. I want something else. I want flesh to eat. So God gave them their request. Look at verse 31 and 32 again. "There went forth a wind from the Lord and brought quails from the sea and let them fall by the camp as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side round about the camp. And as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day and all that night, and all the next day they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 omers. And they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp." Now what we have here is a miracle of stunning proportions. God blew enough quail into the area to pile them up roughly 36 inches deep in a circle around the camp, a day's journey deep. That is absolutely unfathomable. But the people didn't care how they got what they wanted. You follow this? They just want what they want. So they went out to get it so they could eat it. They set about gathering and drying and preparing those birds. They got what they wanted. But you know that's not the end of the story. The psalmist observed that God gave them what they wanted, but sent leanness to their souls. And that took 2 distinct forms. Look at Numbers 11, 33 and 34 to begin with. "And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people. And the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattava, because there they buried The people that lusted. Here's how Psalm 78 describes this part of it. Psalm 78, 29 through 31. So they did eat and were filled, for he gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust, but while the meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them and slew the fattest of them and smote down the chosen men of Israel. In this case, it means exactly what it says. Both the fattest, the gluttons who were stuffing themselves, and the fittest, the chosen men of Israel, were so angering to God that God killed them while they were stuffing their faces. There were a lot of funerals after this meal. Here's the second form of leanness of the soul, though, and it is, in my estimation, worse than the first. Look at Numbers 11, 19 through 20. God said, "Ye shall not eat one day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it come out your nostrils and be loathsome unto you, because that ye despise the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why came we forth out of Egypt?" Now, in case you do not grasp those words, let me spell it out for you. They were literally puking their guts out so hard it was coming up out of their noses. That is some serious leanness of soul. I cannot think of anything in life I despise more than vomiting. I hate it. If I ever am reputed to have committed suicide, the only question you need to ask yourself is, was he puking ahead of time? If I wasn't, I have not committed suicide. I have been suicided by Hillary. I'm just saying there's only one thing that could ever make me that desperate, and that is to be puking and not be able to stop. And this is where they're at. They're eating and they're throwing up and vomiting, and it is coming out their noses day after day after day. That is some serious leanness of soul. But I want you to consider this and really get it. There's only one way that could be possible. There's only one way they could continue to eat that meat while it was making them puke for a solid month. Have you figured it out yet? There were no other options. There were no other options. If the manna had still been an option at that point, if it had either not been buried under a mountain of quail or simply been put on pause for that month of time, they would have laid that rotten meat aside and gone back to the manna. But God didn't give them that option. He specifically and very emphatically laid out the terms. Numbers 11, 19, and 20. Ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it come out your nostrils, and be loathsome unto you, because ye have despised the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why came we forth out of Egypt? God said, you will eat these birds every single day for a month. You want meat? I'll give you meat, and you will have no other options, and you will not turn it down, and you will not back away from it. You want it, you got it. You are going to eat it till you are puking your guts out. They got what they wanted, but God sent leanness to their soul. The title of the message, by the way, is The Tragedy of Getting What You Want. You're beginning to see the tragedy of getting what you want. A lot of these people died, and the ones that didn't die wished they were dead. And that's what still happens in our world over and over and over again among people who have been given God's best but decide they want something else. How in the world does something like this even happen? How does it get to this point? It really doesn't make any sense when you consider it. Have you thought about the manna? The manna is pure. It is straight from heaven. It has no feathers, has nothing to be plucked, has no diseases, has no germs, never makes anybody sick. The manna is plentiful. It sustained a nation of 2 million people for 40 solid years. There was an inexhaustible supply of it. The manna was pleasant. Tastes like wafers and honey. Tastes like hot buttered bread when cooked. There's nothing not to like about it. So why go after anything else? Well, for starters, the manna wasn't the kind of thing they got familiar with back in Egypt. They said, we remember what we ate in Egypt. Leeks and onions and fish and garlic and cucumbers. This isn't what everybody else is eating. Are you getting that? If everyone in Egypt had been eating manna, they would never have had this complaint But they were so fixated for all of their years on being like everyone else around them that when God gave them food straight from heaven, provisions designed for angels themselves, they complained and murmured until God gave them stinking birds, and they puked their guts out or lost their lives along the way. The worst situations you or I will ever find ourselves in are situations in which we push God and push God and push God until He finally says, fine, have what you want. And invariably, what happens next is that people do whatever their flesh wants them to do, and then they give God credit and praise for things He's absolutely opposed to, and then day by day, God begins to send leanness to their soul. Some end up dead. Others end up so sick of their situation, they wish they were dead. Prodigal son got what he wanted. God sent leanness to his soul, and he found himself in a hog pen wishing he could eat the slop and not even being given the slop. Samson got what he wanted time and time again. God sent leanness to his soul. He lost his strength, lost his eyesight, and found himself grinding in the prison house. David got what he wanted, had to have that woman even though she was married to somebody else. And God sent leanness to his soul, and he lost his baby, and his whole house turned against him, and the sword never departed from his house. Judas got what he wanted, had to have that illicit pieces of silver, and God sent leanness to his soul, and he couldn't find a way to backtrack, and he hung himself and died and went to hell. And that very same tale plays out time and time again in our very own day. It never changes from generation to generation. You better be very careful seeking after what your flesh wants rather than after what God wants you to have. I'll call him Joe. Preached with him as a young man. Wanted to set the world on fire for God. Probably could have done it. But he got what he wanted along the way because his desires started to deviate from God's desires. The last time I saw him was in court. He was disheveled and wrinkled and smelled like he'd been sleeping in his own vomit for day after day for weeks on end. They called him and he went up to the stand and answered for public intoxication, drug use, abuse of a woman. He got what he wanted. God sent leanness to his soul. Call him Fred. He was being well used of God in the music program. Everyone loved him, but he had to have that immoral girl. We warned him. He knew better, but he pushed and pushed and got what he wanted, and God sent leanness to his soul in the form of an STD and a broken home. Church I preach meetings at from time to time. Had a lovely young lady who grew up in it, a girl from a good and godly home, sang in the youth choir, had a powerful touch of God on her, but she wanted what she wanted, and what she wanted was a relationship with a lost, blaspheming, rebellious, wicked boy, and she got what she wanted. She pushed and pushed and pushed until she got what she wanted, and several children later, with her health ruined, flat broke, and that boy now not giving a rip about her, God sent leanness to her soul. I'll call him Hugh. He pastored a thriving church. He was respected by everybody, but his own children went into the ministry, but he wasn't satisfied. He got tired of governing his flesh. He just had to have that prostitute he thought no one would ever know about, and he got what he wanted, and God sent leanness to his soul. He lost his family, lost his ministry, lost his reputation, his peace, his joy. He's now driving a big rig day after day down the highway past churches that he used to preach revival meetings in, and it was his own son that had to confront him about his wickedness. I'll call him Charlie. He had a wife and a bunch of great kids, a thriving ministry, and a spotless reputation, but he also had an appetite for pornography. He knew it was wrong, but he wanted what he wanted, and he got it. But God sent leanness to his soul, and he lost everything that mattered. I'll call him Ron. He had a great wife and kids and an ego the size of Texas. Never met a bright light or a red carpet he didn't like, and he got what he wanted. Everybody knows him now, but God sent leanness to his soul, and he's bitter and angry and doesn't have an ounce of joy about him anymore. I'll call her Sally. She was in the youth choir, Sunday school, went to all the Christian camps, had every chance in the world to turn out right, but eventually she wanted what she wanted, and what she wanted was to play around sexually, and she got what she wanted, but God sent leanness to her soul in the form of a busted home and a very public arrest for some horrible things she did. Listen to me very carefully. The manna God sends you may not be flashy or popular, but it is pure and pleasant and plentiful, and it will never result in you being dead or wishing you were dead. The manna didn't just have 1,000 ways to fix it and doll it up like quail. It seemed to just have two, but nobody ever puked up the manna and nobody ever died from the manna. I guarantee you there are some here today who are already starting the process of, I want what I want. But the most frightening part about that is that at some point, God will give in. At some point, God will say, fine, I'll give it to you. But I'm taking my peace from you.
And I'm going to send leanness to your soul. Before you go the I want what I want route, it'd be a much better idea to kneel down at an altar and say, Lord, don't give me what I want. Give me what you want. Because I know that you know me better than I know me. You know the future better than I know the future. You never miss. God, would you just please humble my heart till I'm willing to receive gratefully and joyfully whatever it is that you want me to have. Don't experience the tragedy of getting what you want. The